The next scene takes us to the countryside, where military soldiers are training tirelessly. Among them is Major Kang, overseeing the rigorous exercises. A fellow soldier approaches from behind and reminds Kang that today is Jin's first day at school. Hearing this, Major Kang gets concerned that despite 6 months of lessons on leading a normal life, Jin might struggle to adapt to his normal school life after so many years as a mercenary. But still, Kang feels a sense of pride, and he's confident that the lessons he imparted to Jin will help him thrive in his new life. Well, it turns out Major Kang's teachings didn't quite do the trick, because Jin is making these bullies look like yesterday's trash. The other bullies watch in shock as the injured fatty lies unconscious, eyes rolled back. The bully girl and her sidekick are shaking with fear as Jin strides toward them. In a flash, Jin lunges and lands a devastating punch right in the gut of the other thug, sending him flying and crashing to the ground. The cocky girl's jaw drops in disbelief. When Jin turns his attention to her, his death glare makes her tremble with fear. Daeon pulls the coat off her face, her hands trembling as she takes in the sight of the 2 thugs down for the count. Even though it's only been a minute since she was covered, Jin notices his sister watching him and, after giving the cocky girl one last intimidating look, he walks away from her. He turns to Daeon and apologizes for covering her face so abruptly. The apology only makes Daeon feel more awkward, so Jin tries to lighten the mood by suggesting they grab some snacks from her favorite store. Daeon stammers that it's okay and they don't need to, so Jin decides they should just head home. As Daeon and Jin cozy up, the bully girl is left terrified to see this. She's completely blown away by how this guy who was so terrifying with just a glare is now acting like a sweet, caring brother. As the siblings walk off together, Daeon gives her one last friendly wave before they head out, leaving the bully girl standing there, face frozen in terror. As they walk home, Daeon asks Jin if he was the one who knocked out those 2 guys earlier. Jin confirms it, and this only makes her curious about her brother, since he doesn't seem like the type to pick fights. She then explains that in Korea, staring at people like he did can be considered rude and might lead to uncomfortable situations. Jin agrees, adding that meeting someone's gaze can be risky depending on who you're staring at, which is similar to where he's from. Confused, Daeon asks why he stared at those thugs earlier. Jin simply replies that he noticed she was scared and he wanted to protect his sister. Daeon is startled by these unexpected responses, and she simply bows her head down while blushing. An awkward silence falls between them as they continue walking. It looks like Daeon will need to get used to having a caring brother around to look out for her. When they get back to the apartment, we see Grandpa is a bundle of nerves. He frantically tells Jin to just chill and enjoy some fruit, but our boy insists on taking care of the dishes himself. Grandpa's not sure how to handle this, so he eventually lets Jin take over. As Jin washes up the dishes with a steady hand, Grandpa asks if the dinner was okay, admitting he's not exactly a master chef. Jin, keeping it casual, tells Grandpa not to sweat it. He says the food has been great and he's loved every meal. The old man looks visibly relieved to hear that Jin enjoyed the food. You can even see the glimmer of satisfaction on his face. Grandpa then turns to Daeon, asking if she liked the food as well. She nods and agrees. Next, Grandpa shifts gears and asks Jin about his first day of school, and he is curious to know if anything interesting happened. Jin hesitates for a moment, looking a bit anxious about answering. Daeon also feels a bit uneasy, reflecting on how eventful the day has been. But after a moment of pause, Jin admits that it was a good day. Grandpa's face lights up with genuine pleasure at hearing this, clearly relieved and happy. Once everyone hits the bed for the night, we find our guy still wide awake. His mind flashes back to when his grandpa first saw him, and he can almost feel how grateful his old man was to have him around. Jin's cold heart has slowly started to warm up after living with his grandpa and sister for a while. Then, his thoughts drift to the time he was stuck on that airplane before it crashed. Passengers were in a panic, and the emergency oxygen masks had popped out of the compartments. As everyone scrambled to put on their masks, Jin's parents focused on making sure their son could breathe safely. It was a terrifying day for him. Just as the plane began its downward plunge, Jin jolts awake in the present, leaping out of bed in shock and breathing heavily from this nightmare. His heart is racing, and he finally realizes it was just a dream. He glances at his clock and sees that morning has arrived. As he sits there alone, he hears rattling noises coming from the living room. He stands up and goes out, only to find his sister preparing breakfast for the day. He looks around and asks where Grandpa went. She tells him that Grandpa left for work at dawn. She explains that Grandpa took time off to be home when Jin arrived, but now his paid holidays are over, so he's back to work. She also puts on her uniform, and once she's done, she decides to leave for the day. She tells Jin that breakfast is laid out on the table and reminds him to make sure he eats. With that, she heads out, and Jin glances back at the spread of food left for him. Back at school, we see the same bully girl and the blonde girl, Huijin. It turns out Huijin has discovered that the transfer student from yesterday is Daeon's brother. The bully girl anxiously confirms this. Her mind flashes back to their previous encounter with Jin, and she feels devastated remembering how he knocked out 2 of her friends with just 1 punch. Huijin tries to ask why the bully girl is so scared, but the bully girl remains frozen in fear, unable to speak. I have grown tired of calling her a bully girl, so let's just give her an appropriate name, and let's call her Chicken Shake from this point onward. Huijin continues to press Chicken Shake about what happened. Finally, Chicken Shake swallows her fear and says they should stop picking on Daeon from now on. The glare Jin gave her is still burned into her mind and she can't shake it off. Despite her fear, she tries to reassure herself that everything will be fine because Huijin and her brother are basically the top dogs, and everyone at school bows down to them. After a while, we see Daeon again. As usual, she gets brutally smacked on the head. When she turns around, she sees Huijin and Chicken Shake together, once again there to bully her. Daeon quickly asks what they both want now, to which Huijin tells her to come with her for a second. Our girl asks where they are going. The cocky blonde is clearly ticked off and snaps at Daeon, telling her not to get too big for her boots and to follow orders if she doesn't want to get beaten down. She adds that having a brother isn't going to change a thing. A little while later, we find ourselves at the school's recycling station, where Daeon is getting absolutely pummeled by the cocky blonde. After a few solid kicks, the blonde tells Daeon to keep her head down. Daeon, trying to catch her breath, asks why she's getting beaten up in the first place. That's when Huijin reminds her about her brother. She tells Daeon that her brother doesn't have to act like a tough guy and warns her to explain to her brother to stop getting so full of himself. She further makes it clear that they won't be responsible for Daeon's brother anymore because he's in for one hell of a ride. Daeon, still clueless, asks if that means they're targeting her brother from now on. Huijin quickly confirms, reminding her that the 2 bullies our boy took down were friends of her brother. Since Daeon and her brother dared to mess with them, they're not going to get off easy. It's like poking a lion and expecting not to get mauled. Daeon's face goes absolutely pale upon hearing this. She yells at the 2 thugs, demanding to know what they're planning to do with her brother. But all she gets in response is a solid slap across the face for speaking out of turn. The slap leaves a bruise on her cheek, but the sting of the physical pain is nothing compared to the ache she feels knowing her brother is in serious trouble. Daeon clenches her jaw, steels herself, and bolts out of the recycling station, leaving the 2 thug women behind. The scene cuts back to 3rd year class 2. The atmosphere is thick with anxiety. Even the 2 average bullies in the class are unusually quiet. Everyone's on edge because the school's biggest bully is strolling into the classroom with his entourage, and it looks like the drama with Jin is about to kick off big time. But Jin just sits there cool as a cucumber. The 2 bullies who got knocked down yesterday are also strolling down with their boss. Behind them, the biggest bully of all, the top dog, looms large. Right on cue, Daeon bursts into the room like a tornado. She's panting heavily, her face is bruised, and her uniform is smeared with dirt. Jin abruptly stands up from his seat, and his eyes widening in shock as he takes in the sight of his sister's battered face and filthy uniform. The bully boss starts up with some banter, teasing how Jin's sister is worried sick about her brother. He points out how his own sister, Huijin, all she does is whine and nag at him to do things for her. Huijin also strolls into the scene, and reminds her brother that she will only feel sorry when her brother actually gets his ass handed to him by someone. Meanwhile, Jin is left visibly petrified seeing his sister so bruised up. But before we can see his reaction,